the 3 sessions I did for LinkedIn, one in April, one in May, and one in June. So everyone on this call either attended one of those 3, all 3, or were invited to one of those. I think we probably have a few people who got in elsewise, which is fine. Let me kind of just give a quick overview of what I described in there, and then let's get into what I talked about here is how do you really focus on passive candidates networking, how do you recruit them. I'm not going to go through it. The bottom line is I've written a lot of books. I write 3 to 4 or 5 posts a week on Inc. Magazine, LinkedIn Talent Blog, Influencers, and some other posts. But the essence of everything is performance-based hiring. The bottom line, just to give you a sense of performance-based hiring, is a business process for hiring top talent. It's not an interviewing solution, although it includes interviewing. Interviewing by itself is a point solution, meaning it just stands alone. And if you interview a passive candidate who doesn't want to be interviewed, it doesn't work. It's also a sourcing program, performance-based hiring, but it's not just sourcing. We're sourcing the right kinds of people. It's also you have to close the deal, but it's not just about closing. It's about integrating all of this together. So a business process means all of the components of hiring have been integrated together and optimized to each and every step can be worked and integrated properly. And I'm not going to go much more than that, other than to suggest, let me kind of give you, I think JJ put these into the chat area or the Q&A area. To get, I think there is an automatic download there you can get to. It's bud.url / LinkedIn Masterclass Overview, LIMC Overview. The actual competency model, if you did not download it via when you registered, budurl.com / AGCOEWM. That'll get you to the competency model. And I think JJ will put that in chat a few times if you don't get it this time. But I want to kind of also suggest being a business process means that you can actually track performance. A process means you do A, B, C, and D, and you should get the right results. So for LinkedIn Talent Connect, I'm going to be talking about how you can use big data to maximize quality of hire. But if you know that doing a certain series of things maximizes quality of hire, then you can track those things as part of a process. The things that we have discovered since, and I would say 30 to 40 years have discovered, it's not, people seem to rediscover this and think it's new science, but it's been around for many, many years. To maximize quality of hire, there's certain things that are predictable. Number one, the best recruiters don't need to send out many candidates. They're very efficient. They know what the hiring manager is looking for. They know what candidates need. They know, and if you can get your candidates per hire, meaning I can send you 3 or 4 candidates and you get one hired, and you can do that with all your hiring managers for a lot of different positions, you're a good recruiter. It means you know the job. It means you know how to find candidates. You're a good networker. You know, you're a good screener. You have a lot of influence. So that's just it's a crude metric, but it's very predictable. So when we work with a lot of RPOs and a lot of recruiters, they say, hey, you should be tracking candidates per hire. In addition, another component of candidates per hire metric is sourcing mix. To get to 3 or 4 candidates per hire, 2 out of every 3 candidates need to be passive candidates, usually via networking. That you guys just took a poll, which basically said, I'm going to show another poll, but basically it says, hey, the source, meaning 2 out of every 2 to 1, meaning for every 3 candidates you send, 2 should be passive, 1 should be active. To get to that level, you got to be a good networker and a good recruiter. And that's the only way you're going to get to 4 candidates or less per hire. And another metric to figure out if you're really a good recruiter is now with LinkedIn Recruiter as a tool, and most of you have that, it's easy to get names of people. And we can take any search, you guys can give me any search right now, and if I could have 20 minutes, I could get you 10 names of highly qualified people. That normally, before LinkedIn Recruiter, that would have probably taken me 3 weeks. But now the issue is I can get the names of 10 people. How do I recruit them? How do I get them? So that's the other thing. That to get a sourcing mix of 2 to 1, you have to get 80% of the people you have as names to contact you and call you. Well, I want to kind of show you today how to get there. Obviously, we can't do it all, but I'll get you some ideas of how to do it. But recognize that a business process not only has predictive analytics, and we know A plus B plus C plus D equals quality of hire, well, then we got to track A plus B plus C. So let me just have you read this, because I got this email from Professor Todd Rose and Ogi Agas, two professors at Harvard, are doing a big study about how the world is moving to mass customization in medicine, in product design, in education, but in hiring we still use the massive approach of put a lot of average people through a funnel and hopefully the good people fall through. They were looking for something in hiring that actually made sense, and they asked me to be part of their book, so I'll just let you read that for 20 seconds. Two days ago, I got an email, it had to be Thursday, I got an email last Thursday from Todd, who said, Lou, my book is almost done. We're now moving into phase 2. The book is going to be published in October. No, it's actually January now, moved back to January. We're now doing case studies. I have a not-for-profit with a lot of big companies in it. We're now doing a bunch of case studies. We'd like to do that using performance-based hiring. So if any of you want to participate in a case study project to validate what I'm talking about here, send me an email. We'll give you the email. It's info@louadlergroup.com, which I'll give you again, but just to be part of a case study. But now I want to kind of take this to where I asked you earlier, how do best people get jobs, which was from the recruiter's perspective. I actually asked candidates how they got their jobs. And here's what they told me. I asked 3 questions. If you just got a job in the last 6 months, how did you get it? And when you got it, were you active, or were you passive, or were you in between, a tiptoe or somewhere in between? They're kind of just started to look, but casually. I then asked, if you were active, were you underemployed or unemployed, or were you just employed but didn't like your job? So this is pretty interesting, because this was not asking you how the best people got jobs. It was asking how people who got jobs, how they got them. So far, 2,600 people took this survey. I have it going on for 2 years. Hasn't changed in 2 years, the results. Even unemployed people or underemployed people on a ratio of almost 2 to 1 get their jobs through networking, not by applying. Active candidates who are employed, they don't have time to do networking, so they're actually the only ones that use job boards. They don't still use it a lot. It's almost 1 to 1, a little bit more. The blue is applied. The orange is networking. So even active candidates who use boards also equally as frequently, they use networking. A tiptoe, someone who is a good person who just goes into the marketplace, and these are people who are strong candidates. They call people up. Like if I knew Brittany, or I knew Tracy, or knew Gloria, and we had worked together, I would call those people up. You call people up, and just see what's going on. So they do networking first. Are almost a ratio of 4 to 1. And passive candidates, obviously 100%. But that's how good people got jobs, 2,500. But now I'm going to throw something else which will mess you up here. Only 10% of the total market is active. Only 10 to 15% of, we've also said, we looked at a group of people, we've done surveys with LinkedIn, 20,000 people. Are you active or not active? 10 to 15% are active. It turns out that for high demand positions, only 5% are active. So if you put all your eggs in the applied list, you're not going to get many people. In fact, you're competing with everybody else. I looked for user design spot yesterday on LinkedIn, 3,500 user interface design spots. I'm competing for 10 to 15% of the market, and I went through about 10 of them to see if I could find a good job posting. Most of them had 2 or 3 people applying. I mean, so you can't. So the approach I'm going to say here, guys, is don't spend all your time in one basket for applying. You got to shift to networking. 15 to 20% of the people are tiptoers, and if you can reach out to those through either Boolean and emails or your employee referral program, you got an opportunity to tap the tiptoers. 65 to 75% of the total market is passive. So let me just ask you in chat, where do you spend most of your time looking for candidates? in the chat area or in the question, just put in the question, where do you spend most of your time finding candidates? Looking. You got to look at the bulk of your time, over 50%. When you say LinkedIn, do you mean job postings, or do you mean cold calling, or do you mean networking? Because I find most, because I just work with about 20, 30 companies now, I'm doing this survey, and 90% spend most of the time looking at job postings on LinkedIn. So you mean using LinkedIn to reach out to people, or using LinkedIn for job posting? LinkedIn does everything. Well, I'm going to just suggest very quickly, I can't get there. Why does this happen all the time? I can't get, never mind, I can't get back to the control panel. Let me just see what's going on here. Sorry, guys, I'm just looking down the list here. Okay, a lot of people use job boards. Well, let's just say the idea being is that we really should focus on people who aren't looking, and I want to kind of get into that. And unfortunately, people who aren't looking, they won't apply to a job. So that's another thing. Okay, if you're not applying directly, if you're networking, how does the process look? If you're a tiptoer, and if you're the best of the group, how do you look? This is where I say, in fact, let's put this in the chat area too. And JJ, if you could read these for me, I can't. Think about your most critical positions. Are you in a surplus situation where there are plenty of good people to choose from because you got a great employer brand, or is you just everybody wants to work at your company? Or are you in a scarcity situation where you really got to fight to get the best? So would you say you're in surplus or scarcity? And JJ, if you could just read them out loud, because I can't.
Scarcity, scarcity, scarce situation, fighting to get the best, scarcity, all of them scarcity, lots of exclamation points.
So now we have scarcity, so probably when you look at, you put a scarcity into that same survey I just took, you'll discover that 95% of the people aren't applying, meaning only 5% are. And in a scarcity situation, you can't assume the candidates are active. So when you're, and I think you guys know this, it's pretty obvious, you talk to someone who is a passive candidate, you got to engage with them, you got to talk to them, you got to convince them it's a career move. Sometimes you got to engage your hiring manager and talk to the person, then you got to recruit the person, convince them, hey, you should get serious. And after a bunch of, some time invested, they become a candidate. Well, most recruiters and most applicant tracking systems and most job boards drive people to become a candidate right away. That won't work in a scarcity situation. So this is where performance-based hiring comes into play. It's really 4 parts. You have to engage in a person. You got to understand the job. You got to understand how people look for work. That's the sourcing piece. You got to interview candidates who don't want to be interviewed, or they just, hey, I'm willing to talk to you a little bit, but I'm not going to go through it. I'm not going to take an assessment test. I'm not going to be interviewed. I'm not ready to do that. I'm ready to talk to you, and I recognize I, the candidate, have to give you a little bit of information, but you also have to give me information. This is a two-way street, guys. Then you got to close the deal. And you got to, and I've been around a lot of years, guys. I don't know about you guys, but I've been around when I didn't have a lot of money in the budget. I still take searches, not many, but I still do a few searches. Never have enough money in the budget. So I realized I'm not going to sell money. I'm going to sell career opportunity. So now I kind of gives you the sense of where we're setting up here. So now I'm bringing you all up to speed to where I were the 3 sessions with LinkedIn. In the last session, the one on June 30th, I think, at LinkedIn, I presented what I call the total talent market. And I'm going to create an infographic, and I'm going to show you where the best candidates hang out in this total talent market and how to find them. Total talent market's that square. If I could take that recruiting funnel and look down it and say, okay, here's all the candidates in the total market. The y-axis, the vertical, the top is maximize quality of hire. The bottom is low quality. The x-axis on the left, it's a efficiency-based recruiting model, high volume, offer people lateral transfers, we post internal job descriptions, we screen out people, we weed people out on skills. We emphasize employer branding to get more people into our funnel. We sometimes have followers to try to, hey, let's build a community. If that doesn't work, we start writing, we do our LinkedIn search, we send out Boolean, we send out emails. We then tap into our employee referral program, cold calling, really build up networking. But the left is cost and efficiency, the right is quality, return on investment, we offer people careers. The right is attract, the left is weed out. So when you kind of start thinking, and It takes strong consultative recruiter skills to tap into the total talent market. To get an 80% yield of calling someone you don't know who's a passive candidate, who's a top performer, who everybody can find on LinkedIn, the differentiator is being a great recruiter. The go, no-go line is right here. Below the red line, you're not going to hire the person. Above the red line, you're going to hire them. They might be minimally qualified, but they'll get hired. The best people at the top of the list. Top 25% is where we want to go. But typically, when you think about what companies do in their hiring processes, is they focus on people who apply. And they spend a lot of time screening out people who don't get hired. And I think if you look at X being every single person who applies and is reasonably qualified to be hired, not necessarily a great person, but reasonably qualified, makes the cut, we probably have 20 to 50 times as many people who are not qualified on skills and experience. SEQ means skills and experience qualified. Now we have another group in the total market of active and passive candidates who are also skills and experience qualified, probably 20 to 40 times bigger in terms of total people who apply, but they either saw your ad and didn't apply, which is a ratio of usually 10 to 1 or 20 to 1. If you just look at your ATS statistics, you already know that. I've looked at a lot of them, and it's usually 10 to 20 to 1 of people who saw the posting but didn't apply. And then there's a bunch of people who didn't even see the posting who actually were qualified. A lot of people say, okay, let's get our employer brand and let's really focus on these people who are skills and experience qualified. But now there's another group of people who I call their performance qualified. So now I want to ask you a question. Have you ever met someone who is a top performing person who doesn't have all the skills and experiences listed on your job description? And JJ, you can tell me what's coming through.
They're all yeses so far, Lou.
Yeah, of course. These are all people get promoted internally. Every single internal promotion, which in your poll you basically said were 34%, which is our poll show about the same amount, they got promoted because their performance, they could do the work, might need a little skills training or a little sensitivity training or whatever kind of training, but they got promoted because they could do the work and they're performance qualified. So now all of those people with performance, you never see. These are all our diverse candidates. These are all our non-traditional candidates. These are all people going back to the workforce. We want to go back in the workforce. These are all military vets. They're performance qualified. We never even see those people because we have a job description that emphasizes skills and experience. And those are the active people. Then we got a group that's probably 2 to 3 times bigger than that who are passive people. Well, the talent sweet spot are people who are performance qualified in the top quartile. And you need great recruiting skills to do that. You need great jobs, careers to do that. You need engaged hiring managers to do that. You have to focus on quality, not on quantity. You have to focus on quality of hire, not cost of hire. But all the networking, all the surveys we take is that's where the best people are. So if 75% of the best people are through networking and referrals, why would we spend anything less than 75% of our time doing that? We have to be efficient if we're going to be doing that. So let's talk about, now feel free now, here's where, feel free to start asking questions. I cannot see the questions, but JJ certainly can read them and look at them and say, hey Lou, here's the questions. So start asking questions. I'll stop after this next slide. So when you think about this total talent market and you combine it with what do you have to do to get in the upper right, is I've redesigned the apply button to go down the funnel. So now I'm looking down the funnel, and you can imagine it goes into the center of the funnel. When I first call someone up, I ask a question like this. Would you be open to explore a situation if it were clearly superior to what you're doing today? Surprisingly, anybody I call, I can get 90 to 95% of the people say yes. If I can get someone on the phone, I can get 95%, yeah, sure, I'll be willing to explore it. It does not mean they're willing to take the job. So I don't go into a sales pitch. I say, great, tell me about your background. I'll tell you about the job. We'll see if it's a career move. If I get past that, I say, let's have another conversation. Let's consider this a little bit more deeply. I'll dig into your background for 20, 30 minutes. I'll give you some real oversight for the job, and if it really makes sense to get serious, we can. But we're just exploring. I'm going down the funnel. hey, if I could arrange, I really like your background. I think this part is great, that part's not so great, but if I could arrange a 30-minute exploratory meeting with the hiring manager, be open to that. They still haven't applied. They're exploring. Then based on that, the hiring manager says, yeah, I like this person. Let's invite a person on site. Now they need to apply. But to get to the talent sweet spot, you got to consider your processes going down the funnel as a sequence of steps. What I want to do today is kind of go through some of those steps. So, any questions come up yet, JJ?
Yeah, we have a couple actually about the approach. If the approach needs to be different, if you are building a pipeline of candidates versus not, if you don't have any positions to fill currently but are building a pipeline, is the process different?
I don't think so. No, I think you just have to be more honest. So if I was talking, I just see Julian's name there, so I don't know that that was the person. But if I saw Julian, it would be. Now, obviously, I'm not going to talk to candidates unless I know I'm going to be hiring some people. I'm working with one client in Chicago. I know they're going to be hiring about 30 plant people, maintenance people, manufacturing people, engineers, and a plant supervisor. Well, they're going to open the plant. The plant's not opening till, I'm going to say, Q1 or Q2 of next year. Well, we have a workforce plan. So obviously I can't hire the person, but I'm certainly going to start my networking ahead of time. So if I have a workforce plan that says I need to hire 20 financial analysts or 20 software developers in Q3, I'm going to start at the beginning of Q2 to get those folks. So yeah, that certainly would be the same approach. You just have to be honest with the person. In some way, it's actually easier. Hey, Julian, I've got a couple of spots coming up for senior manufacturing positions. I like your background. They're not ready quite yet, but if one of them made sense in the future, would you at least be open to explore it? That automatically is actually probably a better approach to take even if you do have an open spot, because it naturally breaks the barriers of communication down. If you as a recruiter say, hey, I got 3 spots, I got to fill them right away, it comes across that you're trying to hustle this person. So I think it's a great question. I also think it's a strategy that I would use to just say, hey, you've got a couple of spots coming up, you just like to have a casual conversation. If one of these made sense, would you be open to explore it? So you've added time as a variable that hey, this is not urgent, we just want to chat. So I think that's actually, I wouldn't have thought of that, so it's a great question. If there's another one right there, JJ, that we can answer that's related to that?
Not related, but we do have other questions so that we can address those later on.
Okay, as you see some that make sense, feel free to do that. So here's our total talent market. I'm going to introduce you now to a version of the competency model which you've downloaded. At least that's what I promised. I said we'll go through some of the skills on it. So let's identify that. In our competency model, we have 12 factors, skills, from knowing the job, partnering with the hiring manager, contacting people, writing great job postings, a bunch of stuff you need to do to recruit in the total talent market. On the competency model, we also have a ranking system going across 1 to 5. It's an unusual ranking system in that average is probably 0 is below average, 1 is probably a little bit slightly below average, and everything else is above average. So let me kind of define it, and then I'm going to throw in some competency models and ask you some questions about it. A level 1 means you need training. You probably don't need a lot of training to weed out someone based on skills. You need a lot of training to do Boolean. So in fact, you might even kind of want to just think of your Boolean skills this way. So because that's one competency. You have to do a Boolean search, whether on LinkedIn or Google, and find people. So you don't do it yet, but in a moment I'll ask you to rank yourself on Boolean. Need training. You can kind of struggle through it, but you're not perfect at it. Level 2, pretty much you got it down. Every now and then you need to ask help for somebody. So 2 is, you can do it. 3 is you're highly skilled. You can do it. You don't need any help. Every now and then someone comes to you to ask a question. That's a level 3. Level 4, you're a strong coach. People come to you. You can take a group of people and spend 45 minutes to an hour to talk about how to do some great Boolean searching. And level 5, you're expert. You can get in front of your whole team and train a group of people for 2 hours in a course on Boolean, and you're pretty good. You probably even go to ERE as a breakout session. Shally and Glenn probably can speak to a group of 500 people and be credible. They're above a 5. So just on Boolean, using that 1 to 5 ranking, knowing your ends, ors, nots, all that kind of stuff, how would you rank yourself? Just do that on Boolean, how you'd rank yourself. And tell me what they're coming through, JJ.
Yeah, they're mostly twos with some ones and some threes sprinkled in, but mostly twos.
Okay, fair enough. And the point of that is, so now let me kind of take at each level, to get to the talent sweet spot, you got to be 3, 4, or 5 in certain areas. Let me just kind of describe what it is. To go after candidates who are not looking for a job, you have to know the job. Because the first thing these people, you can call these people up, but they tell me about if I'm not looking, or if they're really a good person, the first thing they say is, tell me what the job is. And it's not a list of skills. They're not, you can't screen these people out. They're going to ask you first, tell me about the job. And you got to very quickly say, well, no, okay, here's about the job. Tell me a little about yourself. And you got to say, okay, this job could be a career move. Let's get serious. So that's the conversation you're going to have. You also have to broadcast people to pull them in. I mean, at some level, you think, you know, if you're just going after X, that little X I have in the lower left there, those are people who apply. There's at least 100 times as many people who aren't going to apply in the total talent market. Well, you have to reach out and pull them in. Now, one level is big broadcasting. Hey, let me get a big giant net and see if I can get some people interested. And then the people you get interested, you got to nurture them because you got to go down the funnel. They're not actively looking. If they're active, they obviously can go faster. If they're less active, they got to go slower. So that's what I'll call phase 1. Phase 2 is going after people who are performance qualified. Now you really need to know the job because you got to look at their background and say, wow, this person has got 4 years of design experience. It says 8, but this person in 4 years is doing the work of a person with 9 or 10 years of experience. Now, is that a good person or not? Let me ask you this. If you found someone with 3 to 4 years of design experience doing the work of someone with 8 or 10 years, do you think your hiring manager would want to see that person? Of course they would. But it doesn't say 10 years, it says 3 to 4 years. So you have to know the work to say, wow, this person's doing the work of a 10-year person. Well, that's pretty cool. Why would a hiring manager not want to see that person? It means they're a superstar. So now you got to use clever Boolean to find these people. You have to have great messaging to say, hey, I found your background. Here's why I like it. Here's why we need to talk. Then you have to be a great interviewer to convince your hiring manager, hey, this person's great, even though they don't have skills and experience. So now to go to this next level, you need stronger skills. Now to go even to the top level, recruiting the talent sweet spot, recruiting into the talent sweet spot, you have to be a strong networker to get people. Hey, Heather, who is the best person you've ever worked with in logistics and supply chain? No, yeah, you worked at XYZ company at that warehousing, at cross-docking warehouse. Who's the best person there? Well, he's not looking. Yeah, who was it, though? Now that's how you get names. That's one way to get names. And you call that person up. Bill Jones. Hey, Bill, I was talking with Heather. She suggested I give you a call. Not that you were looking, just that you were a remarkable person. Hey, let me just ask you a question. I got a couple of spots, senior management spots in logistics and supply chain. If one of those made sense, would you at least be able to talk about it for a few minutes? Well, you have to get the name and you got to call the person. And you got to be a consultative recruiter. You also have to partner with your hiring manager because that person's not looking. The hiring manager's got to be fully invested. So then you can just kind of see how the skill set has to scale up to get to the talent sweet spot. So now I have a question for you. What do you think that of all the things that, and a lot of these are in the recruiter competency model. They're not worded exactly that way, but you could map them pretty easily. Some of them are worded exactly that way. What do you think the top 2 or 3 recruiter skills are needed in order to recruit in the talent sweet spot? What do you think the top 2 or 3 would be?
That's soft skills and trustability, consultative approach.
I can actually see him now, JJ. Somehow I got over there.
Okay.
Sometimes consultative,
Great.
listening. Yeah, listening is an interesting one. Well, I'd say most of you missed it. Most of you missed it. It's knowing the job. At every single level, if you don't know the job, you will fail. Because if you don't know the job, your hiring manager won't trust you. If you don't know the job, your candidates won't trust you. If you don't know the job, you won't be able to get referrals. So everything is dependent at the core level is you better know the job. And it's not a list of skills and experiences. So we kind of just go through what I'd say the job is. So just think about this even. Just think about this, and we can kind of put this in chat. JJ, I'm not going to have time to look here. So here's why this is important. When you first call someone up, you got a name of somebody. It's Amanda. That's a picture of you, Amanda, there. We call you up. You're a logistics manager or whatever. You call someone up who's not looking for a job. You got their name. You use however you got the name, but you got the person on the phone. What typically, and I would say 95% of the time, you talk to a candidate who's not looking, somehow you got them on the phone, what do they always want to know in the first minute or two to see if they should even spend 10 minutes with you? They filter you out as a recruiter. What do these people want to know? I call it the criteria to engage in a conversation of 10 minutes or longer. This is the first 2 minutes. And at that point, they decide, hey, should I spend more time? So, JJ?
Yes, we have money, compensation, salary, budget, credibility. What is the position? What is the title?
Yeah, right. I got it. So, yeah. So think about it. They want to know the title. They want to know the company. They want to know the comp. They want to know the location. They want to tell a little about the job. Everybody wants to know that. And then based on that, say, no, I'm not interested. Don't like that company. Not enough money. Don't like the location. The company. I'm a bigger title. All those things. You just set yourself up for failure. That's why when I ask the question, would you be open to explore a situation if it were clearly superior to what you're doing today, and they say yes, I don't tell them any of those things. I'll tell you in a minute what I do tell them, but I don't tell them any of these things because I know 2 to 3 weeks or 4 weeks from now, when they get a job, the criteria to accept the job will be different. So think about all the people who you said 93% of the people. I said the first question I asked is how do the best people get their jobs? I also asked the best people, how did you get your job? And they told me via networking. And I also asked them, what criteria did you use to get the job? Why did you accept job A over job B? So what's the typical criteria someone uses to accept a job? Put that in the chat area or the Q&A area, and JJ, you can read them off as they come in. This is the criteria to accept the job for someone who's not looking, who's comparing multiple opportunities.
Growth, opportunities, supervisor, advancement, challenge, liking the people, career advancement, the higher manager, the culture, better environment, develop opportunities, team members.
We got it, Jay. Thank you. Here's what it is. I mean, this is the way it was in 1980 when I became a recruiter. The career opportunity. Is this a better job than anything else you got? The job and the impact. What is the work? Is it work that I find satisfying? Is it important work? Hiring manager critical. Do I like the people I'm working with? Compensation, work-life is on the list, but when you first talk to them, it's number 1 on the list. When they take the job, it's as long as you're above the threshold, it's on the list, but it's not number 1 on the list. That's why when you talk to somebody, you can't get into day one conversations. What they get on day one is a title, company, compensation. It's a spot. It's a parking spot with a badge. When they actually accept the job, it's a host of things. It's all these things. And most candidates in the talent sweet spot, you can't figure that out in 5 or 10 minutes. That's why you have to convince people who are not looking, hey, let's get into a consultative discussion. Let's do a needs analysis. Let's see if this makes sense. And that's why knowing the job is the most important thing. Because if you don't know the job, you're selling smoke and mirrors. And I know you've all worked with sales reps who don't know their product. They're just in it for the sale. Well, that's what recruiters are. If you don't know the job, you're just in it for the close, just to get that person hired within your budget. You're filtering out people. You're spending a lot of time going after, weeding out the weak, not attracting the best. A job description like that, skills, experience, that's not a job description. That's a person description. And 95%, I literally looked at about 15 or 20 UI designer spots yesterday for a speech I'm giving to a group of UX managers. A bunch of skills. There weren't very few were job descriptions. They were actually not bad. They were better than most. But most job descriptions are not job descriptions. They're people descriptions. So if you look at your job descriptions, and if 75% says what the person must be, you've got people descriptions, not job descriptions. And if you've got a bunch of vague responsibilities, you have a useless job description. So when I take an assignment with the manager, I say, you know, this is not a job description. This is a person description. Tell me what the person needs to do to be considered successful. I call that a performance-based job description or a performance profile. And every single job in the world can be defined by 6 to 8 performance tasks. Stuff the person needs to do to be considered successful. I start off with, hey, tell me about the big stuff. Now walk me through what they have to do to get there. They got to grow sales by 10%. Okay, if they do that, what do they have to do first? They got to learn the product line. They got to build a territory map. Another thing they might have to do is, hey, they got to build a team of accountants to set up the international closing process on an SAP platform using version 14.3. What do they do first? Well, they got to assess the current team, and they got to set up a development team, and they got to hire 3 more people. Okay, they got to do stuff. They got to evaluate a process, per parent, develop a. They got to do stuff. Give me the stuff that people do, not what they need to have to do it. And I guarantee, if they can do that work, they have exactly the skills needed. And I said, what are you talking about? Yeah, if they can do that work, they have the skills. A top performer can do most of that work with less skills, or less years of experience, certainly. The skills determine the work determines the skills. The skills don't determine the work. We've all met people who have the skills who can't do the work. We've all met people who can do the work who don't have the exact mix of skills. This is performance qualified. I tell managers, I will not compromise on performance. If you want someone to do that work, I'm fine. But give me a little bit of break. Let me find, and then manage, well, no, I need both. I said, good. I'll say you 2 or 3 people who can do the work, 2 or 3 people who have the skills, you decide. Never lost a hiring manager yet. And if I did, well, maybe I have, so I just don't do those searches because I'm an outside recruiter. The work determines the skills. The skills don't determine the work. So this is the difference maker. It's what people do with what they have that makes them successful. And I've asked, literally, we train more hiring managers, and now we train them around the world, 20,000 in the last 20 years, well, probably more than that even, but we've trained lots and lots and lots of hiring managers. We always ask them this question: who would you rather hire? Someone who can do the work or someone who has the skills? 95% say, we want somebody who can do the work. I said, let's define the work first. And I don't even say, would they hire? I said, would you just see somebody who can do the work who has less skills? They always say, of course. Would you at least see someone who can do that work even if they have less skills? Sure. It's a high potential person. That's performance qualified. That opens up the pool to 3 times as many. Getting skills qualified versus performance qualified. It opens up the diversity pool, non-traditional pool, people who returning to the workforce, military, the whole bit. I mean, it just opens up the talent pool to shift to a performance qualified system. That's why this is the #1 recruiter skill. If you don't know the job, guys, you're filling positions. You're not offering career moves. This is the #1 recruiting skill. If you do not know the job, you have no credibility with your hiring manager, and you have no credibility with your candidate. You're going to miss the talent mark because you're going to miss some great people who can do this work. And if you know the job, then all you got to do is say, hey, can this person do this work? That's an interview. We're not going to get to that today. Any questions, JJ?
Yeah, we do have a question, actually. Grace was curious about how do you handle candidates who are only interested in asking for the title and compensation on the first call? How do you switch that to when you're in beyond conversation on the first call?
Great question. Who's the person who said that, JJ?
Grace.
So Greg, I told Greg, you open to explore a situation that was clearly superior to what you're doing today. 75% of the people will say yes to that question. So it's first, are you setting the stage? I don't give a lot of information. There's very little information. Would you be open to explore a situation that's clearly superior? And they said yes. It's very rare that someone would say, well, what's the money first? But if they did, Greg, let me ask you this. So Greg says, well, I might be, but what's the compensation? Tell me a little about the job. I say, let's be real frank, Greg. If this job isn't a career move, it doesn't really matter what we pay you. So let's first figure out if it's a career move, and then we'll figure out if the compensation works. If it doesn't, we can still network and we can know each other, and you never know what can happen 3 to 6 months from now. That's the way you handle it. In our training course, we go through, you have to know 20 scripts like that. I don't care what the candidate says, there's something you can say, under no circumstances tell the person. And I'm going to show you this next part is you got to learn how to drive the bus, which I'll describe that right now. When you think about recruiting in the talent sweet spot, it does take excellent recruiting skills. And part of excellent recruiting skills is overcoming objections like that. Overcoming, I don't like the company. I just got promoted. I'm happy where I am. I'm not looking. How did you get my name? Big deal. I don't even pay attention. I'm going to talk to you guys. It doesn't matter. I got you on the phone. We're going to talk. Now, you have to be someone worth knowing, which is another competency, because when you push someone via an email, and you might have to actually push it. If you got Aperture, you might have to send 2 or 3 or 4 emails out to get the person to respond. At some point in time, they're going to check you out, so you have to be credible. Yet, if you are credible, all of a sudden you got a reasonably credible company. You're messaging, it's pretty good. I should talk to this guy, at least for networking purposes or gal. So this is the bus. We're going to show you how to drive the bus. So Greg just asked me a question. What's the money? If he agrees, so let me just start over. Let me start from the whole bus route. If you notice, this bus is a tour bus. It is not an MTA bus. Most of you recruiters, not necessarily on this call, but we have 218 or so recruiters on this call. Most recruiters are driving an MTA bus. It means they got a destination, they got a fare, they got a job. They're trying to get as many people on the bus, and people come in the front door, and the ones that are qualified get off the back door, or vice versa. Maybe that's what it is. You drive people in an MTA bus, you put people in the bus, they're overactive, they want to get in the bus, you filter them out, some don't get on, then you talk to them, and the ones that you're driving to the apply button, fine. The other one is, sorry, I'm going too far in this analogy, I don't want to go that far. Mine's a tour bus. I don't know where the tour bus is going. When I get someone on the phone, I say, would you be open to explore a situation if it were clearly superior to what you're doing today? 95% say yes to that question. I didn't say anything. I might say, would you be open to explore a senior financial management position, a senior supply chain, a senior product engineering, a senior UX design position? But I get them on the bus. At least I get them a step on the bus. Most people will just sit on the bus and say yes. And I then say, great. I don't tell them about the job. I say, great. Why don't you give me a quick overview of your background? I will then give you a quick overview of the company and the job we have, and if it makes sense to get serious, we can have another call. So basically, we're going to go for a 5 or 6 minute bus ride. Some people, like Greg, say, no, what's the money? And it doesn't matter what they say, I'm going to get 95% of the people, once they agree to go on this bus ride with me, they're in the passenger seat. I'm driving, but they're in the passenger seat. I then review their background. I know the job. I find out, are they looking? If they're not looking, what do they like about the job, their current job? I look at how long on their LinkedIn profile, how long they've been at the job, if they've been promoted recently, if they have the potential to be a top quartile player. I try to find things that could be positive in their job, could be things, what do you like most about your job? Greg, what do you like the least amount? If you could change your job in any way, what would you do? Where do you go in the flow? You really say, oh, this is a spot I really like. And then I say something like this, Greg, it might make some sense to talk a little bit further. Once I get the candidate to chat, my goal is to get the person into the back seat, finding out, is this person really a top quartile person? And now what am I going to do next? What I'm going to do is say something like this to Greg. Hey, Greg, I think this job could be a career move based on what you've just told me. But to be a career move, what I suggest is you have to get at least a 30% increase. But 30% increase is not money. 30% increase is a combination of 3 things. Job stretch, meaning the job is a bigger job. Job satisfaction, meaning you're doing work you like to do. And job growth means we're growing faster. I think this job could do it. I think the stretch is a little bit, we're handling a few more direct reports, and we'll probably be doubling that because of our growth rate in the next year. So I think from a management standpoint, it'll be a bit of a stretch. I think from a satisfaction standpoint, I don't know this, but my sense is, since you said you really like to do the strategy planning and that, well, this job's going to have a lot of that in there, probably more than you have now. From a job growth standpoint, I think we're off the charts here. That could be the concern, is we're growing very, very fast. You're going to be leading a team. You're going to be directing strategy. My concern might be that you haven't made decisions in this kind of fast-paced environment. Regardless, I think we should schedule some time to talk in depth. I do have that one concern. Can you work in this environment? Well, let's assume that candidate really finds that situation exciting. What are they going to do? What is that? And JJ, you could read these. What is that candidate going to do if they find that? Are they going to say, no, I'm not interested, or are they going to try to prove that they're competent or not? So what's a candidate going to do when you tell them they can't have it, but they think they would like it?
They're going to try to see, Anne says, prove their competence, prove their competency. They're going to sell you on themselves. They'll try to convince you. Prove their competence.
So what this is, guys, let me just tell you, driving the bus is called applicant control. It's really the heart of consultative recruiting. It's not you selling the candidate. That's transactional car salesman approach. Applicant control is consultative recruiting. I conducted a mini needs analysis to find out, and I got the candidate to sell me. Recruiting isn't you selling the candidate, it's the candidate seeing a career opportunity. It's a first bus ride. Now I'm driving this bus. That candidate wants to get in that seat. You know now you're in control. That is the key to consultative recruiting. You have to know the job, you have to know human behavior, you have to conduct needs analysis, you have to know the job. You do those things, you're in the game. That's how people get jobs. If you want to you got to be an excellent recruiter. You got to be a consultative recruiter. You have to know the job. People get jobs by network. Even active candidates get jobs by networking. But the best people take jobs because of the career opportunity. And if you can't create that real time, guys, you're not going to be hiring people in the talent sweet spot. Consultative recruiting, know the job, extremely excellent recruiter skills. You have to partner with your hiring manager is the next most important, because that manager has to trust you. But it starts by knowing the work. If they can do the work, they have exactly the skills needed. Having the skills doesn't mean they're motivated or competent to do the work. But that requires you to drive the bus. You're pulling it all. You're the orchestra leader. You're the bus driver. And during that bus ride, you're trying to do your needs analysis. Can I find job stretch? Can I find job satisfaction? Can I find job growth? You pull that off, guys, you will only need to send in 4 candidates or less for any job. You will have a mix that's very passive candidate rich, at least 2 to 1, and you'll be able to call anybody and put them on the bus. And even though they might want to get off the bus, don't like the company, don't like the money, don't like this, that's too bad. We're going to engage. We're going to have contact. That's what our program is all about. That's what we talked about. That's what the recruiter competency model is all about. And our recruiter competency model, we offer a course, the Performance-Based Hiring Recruiter Workshop. We go through all of those steps that we just described here. We use LinkedIn Recruiter as a foundation. If you have LinkedIn Recruiter, you're going to get your money's worth out of LinkedIn Recruiter. We just had one client who told me, she, as a result of her going to it, she got all her recruiters as LinkedIn Recruiter, and she's sending them all to our class. We make LinkedIn Recruiter a valuable resource, not just a job board or a network. It's a valuable resource. If you'd like to go to our website, find our training. I'll give you the website. In fact, I'll put that there too. louadlergroup.com/training or /training. You'll see the online training. If you put in this discount code, you'll get the absolute lowest price, which is pretty huge discount, LIMC 715. You do get a full year. We go through, the training is every month. We go through each module 4 times. You can go through you can go for the next 12 months. You get an e-learning center. You become performance-based hiring certified, which means you can recruit in the talent sweet spot. Some background. If you're interested in any of this stuff or being a part of the Harvard project where you could be a case study, info@louadlergroup.com. Information about all our training, including our hiring manager training, louadlergroup.com/training. And if you want a bunch of resources, our ROI calculator, some other tools we have on there, go to louadlergroup.com/resources. So now I'll open it up. So that's all I'm going to say now. I'll open it up for a few questions, JJ, and we'll call it a day.
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions that are kind of related from Ramesh and Mary and Heather. Anyway, what would your approach differ if you are looking at contract positions versus full-time permanent employment or passive candidate versus active? How would this technique differ between those 4 basic employment groups?
Well, let's kind of take about contract. If you're looking for, and we did a lot of work with the government in 2008 to 2000, a lot of government contractors. If the good contractors, if people, I'll restate it. If people are motivated based on the work they're doing, then this actually works for any position. If you're trying to find a contractor and they're doing boring Java development versus exciting Java development on an important project, well, then it will work. We're tapping into human nature. So it's not a function of the job, it's a function of, do you want people who are highly motivated to do this work, and is motivation to do the work a driver for success? If it is, then it's perfect. But then, hey, what motivates a person to do exceptional work? If they're motivated, hey, I don't really care what work I do, I just want to get paid $100 an hour, and I do average work, and nobody cares about the quality of my work, well, then it probably wouldn't work. It might still work because you do better advertising, you'll get better people. So it doesn't have any intrinsic value, but it has some marketing value to have better ads. But if it has intrinsic value, we were looking at performance, it would work. And we've worked it for, we used it to help the YMCA about 12, 14 years ago to hire 100,000 CAM counselors. I didn't think it would work for them, but it did. We just said, hey, why will someone work in a charity organization and make half the pay that they would at a private camp versus a YMCA camp? What drives their performance? What drives their motivation? And what makes them successful? We did it. We benchmarked the job. What do the best 16-year-olds do differently than an average 16-year-old person do? We then wrote advertising for it, and we created an interview for it. So yes, we've seen it work for all types of jobs where performance matters and a person is interested in improving their skill set. So we think it has worked in all those areas.
Great. Is there regarding the recruiter competency model, is there a good goal number to have at the bottom of the competency model? Is there something to shoot for?
That's a real fair question. I think I would scale it up. I think if you're to really get in the game of hiring anybody, whether they're skills and experience qualified or performance qualified, you have to know the job. So if you're at a level 3, you're in the game on whether the person's active, semi-active, or passive. If you don't know that, you're just filling jobs based on flawed criteria. So that's a transactional job, and people make money doing that, and contingency recruiters do that. I don't think it's a great business model to me, but they make money, so well, who am I to complain? But if you really want to have a value-added recruiter, you have to know the job. The second step is you have to start understanding human nature and behavior. Why do good people switch jobs? So that becomes understanding the person. How do you use marketing techniques? And there's no law that says you guys have to post a job description. There's no law anywhere that says you have to list and post boring job descriptions. And you might argue that, but on the resources page here on the lower right there, lower left, we have a white paper by David Goldstein, the #1 employment lawyer in the country at the #1 law firm. He says, I find it surprising that people post boring jobs listing skills. You don't post any skills. You might want to, but if I post skills, hey, we need a CPA because we got a lot of public reporting. But the real part of this job is setting up an internal management reporting system so that all our operating units can understand how to use financial management to make important business decisions. Well, now you kind of combine the two together. But if you don't know the job, you don't know, you can't even write that. You can't even tell someone that. So that's why I say knowing the job then creates everything. If you don't know the job, you're not going to be a partner with your hiring manager. So at the core level, that's the one you have to get. After that, you're in the game. You can almost do anything. Then you kind of build your skills up. But the foundation is knowing the work.
So on that subject of David Goldstein, Sean had a question about referrals. He says his referrals are a bust, and the OFCCP prohibits him from sourcing without screening. What is his best approach?
That's not true. Where did you ever hear that? I've talked to people at OFCCP. You're going on, that's a myth. You don't have to have an open job to do referrals, to build a following. That's an excuse that somebody's made, but it's not. So the underlying premise is flawed. OFCCP, even if you have an open job, just says it has to be objective criteria. Build a team of 6 sales reps to get 10% of the talent market is an objective criteria. Perfect objective. But if you don't even have a job posting, you say, hey, we're going to be opening 7 sales positions. Would you like to talk about one when they finally open them? So if you don't even have an open posted job, you don't even have to worry about that. But when you do post a job, you do have to have objective criteria. And objective criteria could be outcomes, not skills. Now, you just read the white paper from David Goldstein, and you'll see that. I've actually talked to people at OFCCP. I can't believe how people interpret these rules so flawed. Well, that's a flawed logic there. So is there another part to it that makes any sense,
yeah.
JJ?
Well, there's a part from another. Cheryl actually was curious about at what point should you have them apply? Would it make sense to have them apply after that first phone screen, or do you have is sending the resume through a formal application process the point of application?
Okay, I got it. It depends, Cheryl. Hey, Cheryl, I really like your background. I could set up an exploratory meeting with the hiring manager, phone call, and based on that, if after that, if you're interested in applying to the job, you and I can chat and you can formally apply. Alternatively, the hiring manager might invite you on site and you have to apply once we invite people on. So that becomes but that decision's really up to you, Cheryl. You decide where you want to do it. So I think that's more a part of the conversation. Based on it, I, as a recruiter, only need people to apply when they realize, hey, Cheryl, here's why I think you should apply. based on what you've now said, do you think this could be a potential career move? Because now I think we need to get serious. If you're willing to get serious, why don't you apply and go forward? So at point, I would use that as with some level of discretion based on the candidate's needs as opposed to a rule. When the candidate realizes there's a good move, they got to do it. I totally support that. They got to apply, and they have to use objective criteria. My objective criteria, however, is performance objectives, not skills inputs, outcomes versus inputs. Let's take one last question, JJ, okay?
Yeah, John's question is, how do you overcome a poor hiring manager partner? Do you recommend going around them or just writing them off as a poor quality client? How do you overcome that obstacle?
Wait, say that, repeat the first part of that, JJ. I didn't quite get that.
How do you overcome a poor hiring manager partner?
Well, so now if you're a third-party recruiter, you know that the candidate, the hiring manager, poor meaning incompetent, I assume that's what poor means, or they don't want to do it the right way. If you're an internal recruiter, you have no choice. A third-party recruiter, I'm not going to work with that person. I mean, that's how I do it. And literally, and I still don't reduce my fees. Well, if you give me 10 searches, I probably would reduce my fees. But if I'm just doing a search for manager, director, or vice president, my fee is my fee. I say, hey, I'm going to get you, I will not compromise on that quality person. But if they don't agree to during the service level agreement or during the intake meeting of how to judge talent based on performance, I will not compromise. If the person's got to build a team of 6 sales reps and I got to increase sales in the Northwest Territory by 10%, fine. I will find someone who can do that. I will not compromise on it. I will prove that my candidates can do it. They might not have 10 years experience selling medical device products. They might, obviously, they have to have 2 years, but they've got to also manage a team. They also have a track record of performance. They'll have that, but don't force me to some arbitrary restrictions that don't predict performance. So that's how I do it. If that person manager is not going to do it, I'm not going to work with a manager. If I'm an internal person, I might say, well, let me show you 2 people who meet the skills and 2 people who meet the performance criteria, and you decide whom you want to hire. So that's how I would do it. Hey, guys, let's end it for now. We do have a training program. If you want to become performance-based hiring certified, you will know everything I've just defined here. You'll be able to answer these same questions the way I'm answering them. You'll be able to work one-on-one with your hiring managers, one-on-one with the best candidates in the world. You'll get great referrals. You'll hire great hires, and you will be respected throughout the industry. I hope you guys attend Performance-Based Hiring Recruiter Workshop. I look forward to seeing you there. Regardless, best of luck hiring great people every time. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank you, Lou. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today. You will be receiving a follow-up email in your inbox in about an hour that's got some of the information that Lou talked about today, as well as a link to our resources page so that you can download that legal white paper, which we got a lot of questions about, as well as other things, and that discount code for the upcoming training program. So we thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you on future as a group webinars. Have a great